Hi, Fremont family. I'm Melissa Caldwell. Today, we're considering Acts 7, 1 through 53, the temple sermon of Stephen, who was the first deacon of the early church and its first martyr. His extraordinary discourse and actions reveal a man radically transformed in worship, in belief, and in action by Jesus, Father, and Holy Spirit. Let's look first at worship from Stephen's perspective and from that of the religious leaders. Just before the scene in our passage, Stephen has been described 3 times as a man who is filled with the grace and power of the Holy Spirit, doing great wonders and signs among the people. Acts 6:8. Some Hellenistic Jews began disputing with Stephen, but they could not withstand the wisdom and spirit with which he is speaking. They secretly instigate false testimony against him, accusing him of blasphemy against Moses and God. Acts 6:10 through 14. The opponents view Stephen as attacking their faith, the temple, and the law, and equate any threat to the temple, real or imagined, as a threat to their position and livelihood. So they bring Stephen before the council of Sanhedrin, where the high priest asks him, "Are these things so?" Acts 7:1. Stephen doesn't refute the charges or offer explanations. Instead, he gives a history of God's people, which subtly interweaves the themes related to the charges, the location of God's presence, and the treatment of God's servants. If the listeners had had ears to truly hear, they would have been reminded that God had been near to his people long before there even was a temple. God appeared to Abraham in a foreign land, to Joseph in Egypt, and to Moses in Egypt, through a burning bush in Midian, and at Mount Sinai. In other words, God's transcendent presence will not be limited to any building, region, or even people group. As John Stott has aptly put it in his book, The Spirit, the Church, and the World, the God of the Old Testament was the living God, a God on the move and on the march. To Stephen, true worship is about knowing the true God. He knew new life was found through Jesus, who, being God himself, had enlivened him into relationship with God. Recall the Samaritan woman at the well. Now she, like the religious leaders, who here are focused on the law, wondered aloud when she was talking with Jesus whether Jerusalem was the place where people ought to worship. Jesus answered her, saying, "The hour has come when the worshipers, true worshipers, will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship him." John 4:23. We see the radical contrast between the religious leaders on the one hand and Stephen on the other. Paradoxically, instead of seeking to know or to serve God, the religious leaders are self-seeking, self-serving, and go to any lengths to preserve their power and position. Stephen lives close to Jesus and serves others while proclaiming the gospel boldly, free of fear and free of the need to defend himself. His radiant face reflects his intimate relationship with his Lord, and he's so full of joy, peace, and grace that he appears to all onlookers like an angel. Stephen's stunning example teaches us how an intimate relationship with the living Lord, King Jesus, transforms our worship from false to true. It transforms our lives from self-rule to self-yielding dependency on God, and transforms our speech and our actions from self-preservation to bold, truth-telling witness of the gospel. Are we completely there? No, not yet. But we can make progress. It's been said that we become like those we spend the most time with. Let's spend more time with the Lord together. Let's enjoy the beautiful worship spaces called Fremont Church, with which we've been blessed. Let's never forget that our worship centers are not worship themselves, but rather the launching places for our lives and community with the risen Lord. for the purpose of growing in relationship with Him and with each other. And then, when God purposes specific ways that we can share the good news of the gospel, we can be confident that just as He gave Stephen Holy Spirit power, He will give us what we need to glorify Himself through us as we fall more and more in love with Him. May our faces shine with gratitude for who He is and for what He's done. All praise and glory be to Him. See you Sunday.